Today, we are very fortunate and very lucky to have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Tianshu Zhao from the University of Birmingham. It's not easy to introduce Tianshu. She's a very prolific researcher, very competent, and has published in the top journals in our profession. She has the novelty of being able to pick very interesting, ideas and turn them around into something amazing. One of his recent big achievement was to do a paper with the colleagues which then ended up setting the foundation of the Regional Bank, Development Bank of Wales. I think in terms of impact, that's a kind of a phenomenal. But today, she's just talking about the co-funding and financialization of Chinese firms and said where the shadow lies. Absolutely interesting. And I look forward to listening to this presentation and the paper. Tianshu, the floor is yours. Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. Today, I'm going to present the paper, which is called as Co-Funding and Financialization of Chinese Firms. Subtitle is Where the Shadow Lies. The paper actually is just in a very draft status. Therefore, I'm very happy to receive valuable feedback, help us to improve this paper. So just have a look at the outline. By the way, because my camera is this direction, my another computer screen is this direction. So you may feel I just keep looking around. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to show you the motivation of the paper. Then I will specify the research questions. Then I present the data and empirical models for me to address those research questions. Afterward, I present empirical results. And eventually, I will conclude and also try to explore policy implications. So what is the motivation? The paper was motivated by two streams of literature. First, literature is the one I believe people are familiar with, finance and economic growth literature. The literature predicts a positive relationship between financial development and economic growth. However, when we look at empirical evidence, not all the empirical study support such positive relationship between financial development and economic growth. One of particular angle we want to focus is the insight highlighted by the literature, i.e., if the economy is characterized by financial development with debt shift, the relationship between financial development and economic growth actually is subject to uncertainty. Let me just elaborate a little bit. What do I mean by economy characterized by financial development with debt shift? So from a macro perspective, we can see the financial sector plays more and more important role in the economy. If we measure such importance using the value added by the financial sector divided by real GDP growth rate, real GDP, we can see the proportion increasing over time.
Sorry to interrupt you, Tianshu. We can't see the slides actually. Can you share? Yeah. Are you able to share the slides with us?
Yeah, I'm sharing the slide with you now. Sorry,
we can only see you.
How about now?
Not yet. It takes a little bit of time, so you click on and then give it like.
Oh, so I think here it should be okay.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me know whether this is also okay, because I enlarge the It's okay. Can you see my?
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Oh,
right.
it's gone again.
Okay.
We can see it again.
Yeah, I think it's because I stick to this situation. Okay, so now you can see my slide, I believe. Do you?
No, we still can't see it.
Okay, let me have a look again. All right,
Yeah.
just one moment. Okay, all right. I think now it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me elaborate a little bit. What do I mean by an economy?
Sorry, do you want? Would you like to increase it a little bit?
I think
This
the
is
screen starts
okay.
to go off.
But that can work as well. That can work. No problem. Okay. Let's leave it as it is. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let me elaborate a little bit. What do I mean by economy? It's characterized by financial development with debt shift. So its economy, when we look at the importance of financial sector to real GDP, we can see the proportion increasing over time. But if we look at, the measurement in a great detailed manner, we will find out such increasing important mainly driven by the development of financial sector rather than by the development of real GDP. i.e., if we measure it at macro level, we see financial sector GDP contribution increase. However, mainly because numerator increase. But when we look at the denominator GDP, real GDP actually lag behind in the comparison with the development of financial sector. So this is a macro level definition. All right. As far as macro level definition of financialization, which is to look at the firm's behavior, we see an increased use of debt and other financing instruments by non-financial firms in the pursuit of capital gains of real estate and the financial assets market instead of revenue realized in a production process. So essentially, put one sentence, we see non-financial firms actually becomes a platform for financing. All right. This is the first literature motivated the research. The second literature motivates this research is the traditional literature of corporate finance, which indicate financial capital decision of the firm about financing resources will have important implication for the operation of a business, including risk-taking, firm performance, and long-term sustainable growth in the future. So what I'm doing here is we bring those two literature together. What we ask and try to understand here is we want to know the driving force of the joint use of formal and informal finance, i.e. co-funding. And we also ask what is the impact of co-funding on financialization of non-financial firms, which I defined in the previous slides. Under this overall objective, we ask three questions. So just to give you a punchline, what do I mean by informal finance? All right, generally speaking, we refer to the borrowing from financial resource provider, which is beyond the formal traditional banking sector, and those providers are subject to light regulation, which I'm going to give a detailed discussion later on when I start to introduce my definition and measurement. So I ask three questions. The first question I try to understand is why co-funding. So put differently, I want to understand or directly examine whether formal and informal finance, those two complements or substitutes relationship between those two types of external financing resources. So let's look at the literature. So literature, very traditional literature actually assume formal and informal finance, are used by different set of borrowing firms. Therefore, indicate formal and informal finance actually two market segmented, separate from each other. If we put it in different way, actually, it's referred to the situation, we call it credit rationing, type 1 credit rationing, i.e. firms who cannot get access to formal finance will start to use informal finance. Therefore, we see two different sets of borrowing firm, one use formal finance, another side use informal finance. Okay, so recent literature start to ask, question whether there's a possibility like a firm actually same set of borrowing firm which use formal and informal finance at the same time, simultaneous use of both types. Okay, this situation actually is the two markets start to overlap with each other. So let's look at what the reason the literature put forward for explaining such a market overlapping of formal and informal finance. The first literature still thinking about from asymmetric information problem in the financial market, talk about when, banks or formal finance providers, they do not have perfect information or suffer from asymmetric information problem, they will randomly ration credit. Therefore, when we look at the firm, we see them having unsatisfied demand for external finance. Okay. In addition to this, literature start to talk about there's quantitative regulatory control, on the quantity of credit supplied by the formal banking sector. Like in Chinese situation, we know formal banking sector actually subject to credit deposit ratio regulation, plus capital adequacy requirement has been widely implemented in the banking system worldwide. Therefore, when banks are subject to financial constraints, they cannot satisfy all the demand imposed by the demand sector, okay, by the borrowing firm. So this is, separate literature from what I really focus on the story I'm trying to sell to you today. All right. So other literature actually start to think, if we really argue informal finance and formal finance, actually they charge customer at different interest rate, i.e. borrowing firm face different level of financial cost when they borrow formal finance or versus informal finance. And some firm want to use both, must because using both has benefit for them. Particularly if we assume informal finance is more expensive compared to formal finance, we have to have argument indicating informal finance per se is very valuable for firm. If we assume firm, is rational decision-making unit. So basically, the literature started to discuss those possibilities. The first literature talk about this one actually is literature by Hans de Greze, which published in 2016. Here, the paper using Chinese firm arguing actually informal finance has informal finance provider has information advantage, and the firm want to jointly use formal and informal finance because they want to take advantage of informal finance providers' informational advantage. Also, they want to take advantage of informal finance providers' advantage in terms of scale, because banking sector has branches. Therefore, as far as loanable funds is concerned, they have large scale or high capacity to provide loanable funds to borrowing firm. So they jointly take advantage the benefit of each, and therefore they simultaneously use both. Okay. However, I have very significant suspicion about the assumption used in the literature, i.e., informal finance provider has information advantage, because the literature, when you really look at several streams of literature, there's a reason why we question what does information advantage of informal finance provider mean, or where does such informational advantage of informal finance provider come from? This argument actually directly contradicts with the modern theory of financial intermediation. In this theory, actually, we advertise the existence of formal banking sector because they are specialized in information production. Therefore, they are good at reducing informational gap, between providers and the demand side of external finance. But here, you actually assume it away. Secondly, when we look at what informal finance, those literature are talking about, you can see they mainly refer to borrowing from family and friends, also refer to borrowing from a business partner in the form of trade credit. Okay. However, such announcement regarding the information advantage of trade credit provider does not seem to help us to understand why trade credit provider provide credit by selling goods. It's not provide credit by giving cash away, but rather link the credit with goods and services provision. Means, if you trust somebody, basically, you should give money away directly while you have additional cushion to against default. Secondly, when we talk about borrowing from family and friends, when you look at the literature or look at the survey evidence, you can see people try to avoid, borrowing from family and friends because they try to, borrowing in the business basis, manner. Actually, although family and friend seem to be the most, close party to the demand side for external finance, but borrowing from a family and a friend is not the first choice for majority of firm whenever they have need for informal finance. Okay, this is the thing I spend a lot of time, but I really challenge this, literature. So going on, okay, so also literature in the banking, let's look at the banking literature. Banking literature does suggest there's a motivation for firm utilize, multiple resources of finance because they don't want, subject to firm does not do not want to subject to market power and informational hold up if they exclusively borrow from one bank or exclusively borrow from one resource of external finance. Okay, this is a reflection of a firm's choice. In my story, what I try to say is actually because the formal finance provider and the informal finance provider actually subject to different degree of regulation. Therefore, actually, in the provision of external finance to the borrowing firm, actually, they require firm to obey different operational behavior in order to help them to fulfill their regulatory liability imposed by the regulation. Okay, so for certain type of non-financial firms, they have incentives to get rid of the inflexibility and the restrictiveness on decision-making autonomy because of regulatory rigidity passed by the formal creditor to fulfill their regulatory liability. For them, actually, the cost associated with inflexibility of operational behavior and restrictiveness on decision-making autonomy is higher than financial cost per se. Therefore, they want to jointly use formal and informal finance, try to get rid of, the restriction if they exclusively borrow from a formal finance sector. Okay. So therefore, my focus of this is my first research question. I actually directly hint my second research question. I ask, the relationship with co-funding and financialization, i.e., the impact of co-funding on financialization, whether we can see a positive relation or positive causality, basically. What I'm trying to argue is formal and informal finance are imperfect substitute, because the formal finance provider and informal finance provider, they subject to different degree of regulation, also subject to the regulation imposed by different regulator, which I'm going to talk a little bit later on. And also formal and informal finance actually have different degree of efficiency in monitoring how external finance provided by them to be utilized by the firm. Okay, so this argument of imperfect substitution actually beyond just pre-contract screening stage. If we see a financial contract, we normally want to decompose it into several stages. First of all, we talk about the pre-screening. Okay, and then we talk about the during course of a financial contract, there's a monitoring behavior, and then we have post financial contract. What I argue here is the imperfect substitution between formal and informal finance actually is in the middle. All right, it's related to how formal and informal finance different from each other in terms of efficiency of monitoring the use of external finance by the firm, because they have different mechanism to implement the monitoring activity. Also, they have different incentives because the formal finance sector subject to regulatory liability. Informal finance sector has a light regulation. Okay, so even the joint use of formal and informal finance is not a strategic responsiveness of non-financial financial firms to get around various restrictions passed on by formal creditor. Because of regulatory liability, co-funding actually allows substantial room to divert the financial resources to financialization. Just to remind you what I mean by financialization, I mean firm actually engage a lot of activity associated with real estate and financial investment. Also, firms see high importance of capital gain provided by real estate market investment and financial market investment in the overall profit maximization behavior. Okay. So why I can see it, why I said there's a substantial room for them to do it. First of all, when we face multiple creditors, okay, traditional literature tells us there's a free riding of monitoring effort. because this is the reason why traditional literature actually argues single creditor can do better job in terms of monitoring compared to multiple creditors. All right. So I further argue, the problem is magnified if we see we have formal and informal finance provider. They differ from each other in terms of efficiency, in terms of incentives, in terms of regulatory requirement imposing on them as far as monitoring how the financial resources will be utilized by the borrowing firm. Again, let me remind you, this is during the course of financial contract. It's not about the pre-screening. It's also actually beyond the credit risk per se. The increasing challenging. We mentioned. Actually, literature also told us, banking sector should be specialized in the information reduction, asymmetric information handling expert. However, when there was a participation of informal finance provider in the game, formal creditors actually increase their difficulty to trace, the source, trace the whole cycle of credit cash flow, all right, and distinguish the source of any single transaction. And because of this, actually their efficiency, not only their incentives will compromise if we only look at the first literature, but also their efficiency of monitoring the use of financial resources during the course of financial contract, also compromise. In addition to this, such compromising efficiency will also, lead another round of problem when the banking sector cannot pin down whether the creditor, cannot pin down whether the borrowing firm actually divert the use of external finance to engage in financialization. They cannot exercise discipline. For example, they cannot say, look, because you didn't use, the money I provided to you to the operational process, I will discipline you. I will, I will stop supplying credit in the future and so on. Okay. So this is my second research question. So you can see, actually, I argue, in the there's a conflict of interest between firms' objective function and the intention of regulation. Okay, we have reason to argue, firm has such incentives. This leads to the third research question. I'm asked whether the relationship between co-funding and financialization would be more pronounced if we are looking at the firms who is operating in an industry which characterized by intensified competition. Also, whether we see a stronger relationship if we look at a firm who characterized by stronger shareholder orientation. Okay, so why I have reason to ask this, first of all, if the core business operation per se is characterized by intensified competition, means the marginal return from financial capital, if the firm has to invest the money into the core business operation, is shrinking. Therefore, actually could lead to a substitution effect between operational activity and the financial investment activity. This gives us the incentive to think whether competition play a role to intensify the relationship. Second one, stronger shareholders' interest for high-risk, short-term investment could lead to a rebalance between shareholder orientation and actual capital accumulation on core business activities. because the shareholder pursue short-term return, they want to, materialize the benefit, shorten within shorten decision-making horizon and shorten investment horizon, which could lead, firm which characterized by high degree of shareholder orientation, to use co-funding in order to use those external finance to engage financialization activity as long as this fulfill shareholders' goal. So the third argument is such a relationship would become even stronger. The relationship, the intensified relationship because intensified, competition, or because stronger shareholder orientation could be even stronger in the economy, which characterized by a high degree of uncertainty. This is because when the economy characterized by a high degree of uncertainty, actually firms have incentives to pursue short-term gain, okay, or they want to invest something, which they could reverse immediately. They don't want to involve long-term investment, okay, which actually very much relevant or reflection of the sample period I'm going to introduce next. Okay, so just to remind you, I have 3 research questions. First of all, I want to understand what are the driving force for use of co-funding. Secondly, I want to understand why the co-funding will lead a high degree of financialization. Okay, thirdly, I want to know the relationship between co-funding and financialization, whether it's going to be even stronger when we look at the firm, operating in industry characterized by intensified competition in the core business. Also, we want to know such a relationship, whether become more important when we look at, firms which characterized by a high degree of shareholder orientation. So now I'm going to introduce my data. My data actually is based on the survey conducted at the end of 2017. The survey enabled to gather 2,093 non-financial firms from 99 prefecture city across 29 provinces in China. Okay, just to let you know, we have 31 provinces in China. We have 300 something prefecture city in China. The unique feature of the survey is, first of all, it's a recent survey. We include both state-owned enterprise and non-state-owned enterprise. We also have larger economic geographical coverage and the number of observations, which create a sharp contrast with the existing literature. They look at the Chinese firms' behavior in terms of formal and informal finance. The existing literature mainly use the World Bank survey and the Chinese private enterprise survey. They use those surveys which conduct at 2006 or 10 around. Also, they have very limited geographical coverage, economic geographical coverage. Okay, so the questions are directed to the past 3 years. Therefore, actually, we ask during the past 3 years, what you have been doing and what kind of finance you're using and so on. All right, I'm going to introduce a little bit later on. The survey covers information regarding the basic firm characteristic, including ownership, size, legal form, shareholding incentives, and Min-Bank relationship, where they are located, and the industry the firm belongs to. So we further supplement the data with CSMA data because we want to gather some information about the industry characteristic, combine those information in our analysis. So okay. before I going forward, I want to have several sentences just to introduce the economic situation, why this particular sample period, give us advantage to engage such analysis. First of all, this period of time actually is after 2009. You guys maybe know during financial crisis period, in the post-financial crisis period, the Chinese government implements a 4 trillion stimulus plan. Okay, and this is the period when the government started reverse this, plan and tighten up credit policy. Okay, this is also the sample period, which we can see the informal finance become booming. Okay, because the reverse of stimulus plan, therefore a lot of unsatisfied demand, stimulate the emergence of different informal finance resources appearing in the marketplace. Particular concern for Chinese government is we see a booming shadow banking during this period of time. Okay, also this is the period of time, Chinese GDP growth rate start to slow down. We can see it's L-shaped, GDP growth rate. When we look at the macro level data, actually we see, as far as the financial development of financial sectors in GDP growth is concerned, almost double. However, this period of time, such a double figure, mainly because of financial development and the financial sector's development. As far as the real GDP is concerned, actually lag behind significantly, okay, because we have L-shaped economic growth. This is also a period of time we witness global economic uncertainty and trade friction. Therefore, when we look at figure provided by newspaper like attention index and so on, you can see developing concern regarding economic uncertainty in the future. Okay, so again, this is also the period of time when the interest rate liberalization has completed. We completed in China, the interest rate liberalization completed in 2016. Therefore, the financial cost borrowing from formal finance and borrowing from informal finance actually narrowed down. Okay. So I just let you know why I ask this question, So let me look at how I define formal, informal finance and co-funding. So as far as the measure of informal formal finance is concerned, any of bank loans, okay, discounting of banker acceptance bill and the discounting of commercial acceptance bill, if the firm answer they use those channels to finance themselves in the past 3 years, we will treat it as one, otherwise we will be zero. Okay, as far as the informal finance is concerned, we ask them how they finance themselves during the past 3 years, and any of online peer-to-peer lending platform, pawn shop, small loan company, borrowing from individuals, borrowing from other non-financial firms, will be treated as one, otherwise will be zero. Anyway, because it's a survey data, therefore you can see, actually a lot of information is categorical information or use dummy variable significantly in this paper. Okay, so let me just introduce a little bit about why this portion of informal finance is particularly interesting. in my story. I mentioned, this period of time, actually, we see a booming shadow banking, and then Chinese regulators start to develop concern and implement policy, to stabilize, those concerns, because there was a systematic risk concern. However, this portion of informal finance was not in the center of those regulatory efforts, because regulators think, this portion of informal finance has no direct link with the formal banking sector. Okay, when I say direct link, mean regulator mainly focus on the regulation of formal banking sector, directly operate in, like wealth management product or interbank market between banks and so on. All right, or banks direct as participants, that type of financial product, but a little bit is beyond the regulation radar, belong to the shadow banking. So actually, it's kind of ignored part, although the policy effort in terms of stabilize shadow banking has been implemented since 2014 onwards. Okay, when we look at this portion, actually, this portion characterized by lowest level of institutionalization, regulation, and enforcement. Just to be sure, in China, informal finance does not mean it's illegal. Actually, it's legal. A lot of them are legal. In particular, my definition here are legal ones. Okay, but they are characterized by low degree institution, means they are not subject to very clear regulation regarding documentation, regarding stability of physical operational space or information disclosure. Okay, and a lot of, actually majority of those components in my definition of informal finance are subject to regulation of local administrative level rather than central regulatory authority. So actually you can see, we are facing, when we talk about the formal finance and the informal finance provider, we are talking about, they are regulated, even there's any regulation by different regulator as well. Okay, in particular, those components with subject to the regulation of local administrative level, local officer, actually quite often you can see they face the tension between short-term economic growth, stabilization of their local financial market, and the unsatisfied demand or growing demand by the real sector for external finance as well. Okay, so even there's enforcement, actually, even there's regulation, the enforcement is not very, rigorous. Okay, so in addition to this, I want to draw your attention to this is there's no any form of speculation on the purpose of credit obtained from peer-to-peer platform, small loans company, and pawn shop until 2020. Means actually borrow regardless what's the purpose of applying external finance from those informal finance provider. There's no regulatory liability or therefore incentives for them, for informal finance provider, to think how those money will be utilized by the firm. Okay. So as far as co-funding is concerned, we defined as if we see both formal and informal finance has been used by the firm in the past 3 years. Okay. Now I'm talking about my definition of financialization. In the survey, we asked them those questions, and then we derived, 3 measures to measure financialization. First of all, we ask them to what extent you agree you're buying wealth management product. This is the product offered by trust company and formal banking sector, actually. Investing real estate and holding share issued by property development company, lending to other company, providing entrusted loan to other company, while banks, what is your involvement? To what extent you agree you involved in those activity? The answer is formulated while 5 Likert scale. Any of them, if larger than 3, we will see, we define its involvement, high involvement and low involvement. And the second measurement of financialization is we ask them to what extent they agree. Again, it's a 5 Likert scale. The majority of profit in the past 3 years is attributable to the capital gains from financial assets and real estate. Okay, we define in the similar way, high contribution and low contribution. We also add on one additional financialization measurement. Okay, you can see the first measurement actually directly reflect, my first slide when I introduce the definition at the firm level. We also add on another dimension of, examination. We look at the sustainability of the profit. We ask them in the past 3 years whether the company has demonstrated consecutive positive profit or not. Okay, yes or no. All right. So we utilize as a measurement of stability of the profitability in the past, 3 years. So we have, key variable interest. We also have like financialization variable. We also have several set of control variable, because the survey actually asked them quite a number of questions. I was very surprised they answer all the questions actually. Okay, we know the nature of their relationship with their main bank. We know whether the bank name. We know whether the bank is a national bank or local bank. We also know the duration of the relationship with the bank, and we also know the definition of size, industry, legal form, ownership structure. Just by the way, we define ownership whether it's state-owned ownership or not as follows. If the firm said I actually is state-owned or township collective-owned, we define as state-owned ownership, because township and collective-owned also is not private ownership. Okay, we also know their characteristic about corporate governance. Basically, we know their incentive scheme facing by the board of director and the senior management team. We also know the location, and we ask them directly what the perception of the environment of the informal finance market. We ask them whether you think their formality and soundness, whether they looks all right, basically, even subject to light regulation. And also we ask them whether they have a cooperative relationship with the social welfare organization. Okay, because in the Chinese literature, you will see actually a lot of Chinese firms actually try to utilize the corporate social responsibility behavior to facilitate their access to external finance and so on. Particularly in Chinese story, they actually help government to handle the social responsibility behavior. If government has a high fiscal deficit, kind of create a relationship with the government. Okay, we also ask them a question regarding what is the source of finance they use when they register their firm. Okay, so Just to give you a basic, when we first look at the data, I remind you we have 2093, observation when we finish our survey. You can see, don't use either informal or formal or informal finance. Actually, have 258. Use both. Actually, have 1,400 something. Use formal but not informal, and use informal but not formal. Basically, this type of distribution. One thing I want to highlight it here is I make a comparison with my paper or my data with of my paper, this data with what used by Hans de Grisse published in Journal of Financial Intermediation, based on the private entrepreneur survey conducted in 2006. What he found is only have 13% of firms, Chinese private firm, utilize co-funding. However, you can see in my story, the proportion of my firm actually use co-funding more than half or almost half, let's put it in that way. So you can see in this sample period, actually using co-funding seems to be very, prevailing phenomenon for the Chinese firm. Okay, so we also ask them, whether they absolutely agree, when they have demand, even they want to pay high interest rate, they cannot get demand, they cannot get credit from formal banking sector. Actually, only 120 answer yes. Actually, I will let you know, I eventually get rid of this portion because I want to look at, the firm's, behavior when they actually does not subject to, type 1 credit rationing. Okay. So you can see my distribution legal form, SOE and non-SOE, and also size distribution. Okay, this I'm going to go down the second. Do I exceed time dramatically?
You are muted.
Yeah, keep going, maybe in the next 10-15 minutes.
Okay, please. Sorry, I just forgot the time. All right. Huh? Okay, so let's look at my equation. So I just want you to know, actually, it's a parsimonious version of this equation because we start from very general specification and then pin down eventually. Okay, co-funding actually is use or not use. Actually, this is the nature of bank, the main bank, whether it's state-owned bank or nationwide bank, duration with main bank, leverage, okay, and the firm is state-owned ownership or not, the size and the legal form, whether when they register, they use co-funding or not, whether they have cooperative relationship with social welfare organization and the shareholder incentives. Also, what's the name? Local intermediation, the city level financial development, their perception of informal finance environment and the industry. Let's just look at the result. All right. Sorry, I take so long time to jump to the result. What I did, actually, I estimate two equations just to make a comparison. I estimate dependent variable co-funding. Also, I estimate another dependent variable is use informal finance. You can see, actually when we use dependent variable as using co-funding versus the counterparty will be neither, or use informal, not use formal, not informal, use informal, not formal. As far as formal is concerned, the counterparty will be neither, use formal, not informal. Okay, so let's look at the result. Who is using co-funding? We can see firms, if they have a relationship with local bank rather than nationwide bank, actually they will reduce the likelihood to use co-funding. co-funding. This result consistent with the banking literature, said the local bank, they have closeness relationship with the firm at the location where they operate. Therefore, the asymmetric information problem relatively minor. As a result, they are willing to provide more credit to the local firms. Okay, so we also see actual duration will lead to high use of co-funding, which consistent with the literature. Saying if you have longer relationship with your main bank, a bank would help you more. Okay, because the bank accumulate information during the relationship. The particularly interesting is looking at the comparison between use co-funding and informal finance. Apparently, your relationship with your main bank help you get access to informal and informal finance. So means if you have good relationship with your main bank, you actually has certain capacity to get access to formal finance. For this group of borrower, formal and informal finance are complementary. As far as those who has, as far as those as far as the impact duration on use of informal finance is concerned, actually, it's not relevant at all. Okay, because actually use formal and informal finance complementary for the firm. After they have access to formal finance, then they start to utilize some informal finance. Okay, so we also found out state-owned ownership actually have lower likelihood to use co-funding, which consistent with Chinese literature. They said state-owned ownership has better access to the formal finance sector. Okay. So it's also interesting to say, actually, if they register, they burn as, using co-funding, actually, they keep using co-funding, even they start to, grow up in the later stage. Then also we found out city level, financial intermediation environment at the city level, if it's better, will reduce the likelihood of using co-funding, because this is a measurement of a formal banking system. Also, we found out the perception of informal financing environment. If the borrower believe informal finance system is relatively favorable, actually would lead jointly use formal and informal finance, indicate actually is co-evolution of formal and informal finance system. Okay, let me just summarize those results. High probability use co-funding. Actually, we found out not having a remote relationship, because the bank actually is national bank. Will have high likelihood using co-funding. This indicates informational advantage of regional bank. Longer length of operation relationship with the main bank increase co-funding. Okay, we also found a high leverage non-state-owned ownership. Actually, medium size have high likelihood using co-funding. We found the path dependence, because we found out both situation of using co-fund will continue use co-funding, and the lower principal agency problem between shareholder and management, characterized by high incentives. Actually, here. High incentives of shareholder orientation actually lead to a high use of co-funding. Okay, when we compare, with the use of informal finance, you can see actually duration with relationship of banks with your bank facilitate use of formal in addition to informal. So it means this is for those firms is complementary relationship. However, co-funding seems to be problematic for smaller firm. If the firm actually cannot get access to the formal finance at all, actually they have to use informal finance. You can see actually this firm I just highlight in red what's the difference between those two. Okay, so also I found out local formal banking sector will reduce co-funding, and informal finance means actually formal finance is enough to support firms' demand, and also found out better informal finance environment good for co-funding and the use of informal finance suggest the two systems actually co-evolution. Now I'm going to look at the second part of my discussion. I look at whether co-funding and use and non-use co-funding. If I want to look at the impact on financialization, I first check whether there's overlapping between those groups, i.e. those two groups are comparable. Apparently, I don't have much concern regarding the over-supporting density of those two groups. Okay, I'm going to just go to the main point. So what I did, why I already introduced actually, three measurement, and here actually I exclude, neither nor. So I also add up, informal only. So our benchmark group become formal finance user only. Okay, so as far as the rest is concerned, very similar to the specification of my previous model. So let's look at them. Let's focus on this first, column because the rest just a robustness test. We can see using co-funding, relative exclusive use of formal finance actually increases the likelihood of heavily involvement in financial asset and real estate asset investment. As far as the informal only dummy compared to formal only dummy is concerned, the result is not significant. It's across all the robustness test. Okay, and the second equation I want to show you is I want to look at the impact of co-funding relative exclusively use formal finance, whether lead to high importance of capital gains from financial asset and real estate in the profit generation. We can see, again, we look at the first column. Okay, again, co-funding relative exclusively use formal finance actually have high likelihood, have high importance of capital gain from those investment activities. As far as informal finance only, relative formal finance only is concerned, the result not significant. Okay, and then we look at the profit. Just to remind you, the profit is a positive profit in the last 3 years. We look at co-funding relative exclusively use formal finance, whether is lead lower likelihood, consistent, persistent profit in the last 3 years. We look at the first column. You can see actually, indeed, compared to formal finance exclusively use formal finance co-funding lead to lower sustainability of profit in the past 3 years. Also, we look at informal solo dummy compared to formal finance only. You can see the result is positive. You can see apparently we are not surprising because formal finance still cheaper compared to informal finance. Therefore, our co-funding dummy actually capture something beyond the cost of financial capital per se. Okay. So let me just, to look at the final question. I want to ask whether, the positive relationship between co-funding and the financialization relationship become more pronounced if we are looking at the industry characterized by intensified competition. What I did is I look at the change in the concentration ratio before our survey. Basically, if smaller than 0 means become more intensified, this column give us larger than 0, larger than 0, larger than 0. We can see compared to, intensified computation, the impact of involvement is stronger. Okay, compared to intensified, computation, compared to less intensified computation lead to more contribution of capital gain derived from financial investment and real estate investment. We also see actually intensified computation actually lead to high degree of low degree of persistency of the profitability compared to low intensified computation. Okay. And then what I did, actually, I separate the sample into two parts. We look at the stronger shareholding incentives and the weaker shareholding incentive. Like stronger shareholding incentive is defined by the group in which this group has board of director and senior management team both have 5% and above ownership of the firm. Okay, I get very similar result when we compare to the lower shareholding incentive. Higher shareholding incentive lead to higher involvement in the financialization behavior and a higher contribution of capital gain from financialization compared to lower counterparty, and a higher degree of in persistency of profitability, compared to lower incentives. So actually, I did another wrong thing. Actually, maybe due to time constraints, let me just jump to my conclusion. You can see, actually, I did several rounds of robustness test as well. The result is very similar. Also, I try to handle endogeneity problem. The result actually holds. I did use several matching scheme, propensity scheme, and also try to use instrumental variable to handle endogeneity concern. Okay, so now I'm going to conclude. So I show you formal and informal finance are complements for firm with debt capacity from banking credit, mainly refer to they have good relationship with their bank. Okay. By contrast, firm who might face financial constraints from the formal finance, i.e. smaller firms, informal is a substitute for the bank finance. I found out co-funding compared to the exclusive use of formal finance increases the likelihood of higher level of involvement of financial activity defined by financial market investment and real estate market investment, and higher capital gain from those two activities in the overall profit generation. Also lead to a high importance. I mentioned it. However, co-funding does not seem to enhance the likelihood of having a persistent profitability for the firm. Okay, I didn't go through this. I also found that the intensive reliance in the informal finance in the co-funding mix further exacerbate those impact. The impact of co-funding is more pronounced for firms with stronger shareholder orientation and operating in an industry characterized by intensified competition. Just to remind you, this result hold even I did further, analysis looking at the intensity of reliance of informal finance in the co-funding mix. All right. So policy implication. So remind you, actually, this portion of informal finance was ignored by the regulator of the Chinese government because they believe this part, banking sector has not directly, took part in. Therefore, but we show actually borrowing firm borrow from both sector actually greater interconnection between formal and informal finance, sector. Okay, bring the shadow back into our story. We found out, the use of co-funding by borrowing firm actually could lead to, increase in orientation of financial sectors towards financialization activity, which could reduce the company's core business growth potential, also limits the future profitability. Not only so, could carry potential to intensify risk, both institutional and systematic level. Okay, so what is the policy implication? I initially read my result by myself, actually. I was thinking, because apparently this informal finance we are focused on is outside the reader of regulation. Therefore, seem to suggest we should incorporate this part into regulation, and under the rigorous regulation framework together with the formal financial system. This is just the first intuition and look at the result on the face value. But I have to remind you guys, what I try to argue and sell you today, is the reason why firms start to look for, informal finance, it's because firm want to get rid of operational flexibility, which because informal creditor need to fulfill their regulatory liability. Actually, the reason why we have the result actually is not because regulation per se. It's not because insufficient regulation per se. It's because too much regulation. Okay, therefore, my fundamental policy implication is I call for a holistic long-term approach for a deeper and sound market-based reform in financial system plus in the overall economy. I'm very sorry I take so long time to finish the presentation. So,
please, background. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Tianshu. Absolutely interesting presentation made with so much energy, and this is why it took longer, but it was very well clear presented with a lot of energy and interesting.
I'm very sorry, Victor.
No, you shouldn't apologize. No, you shouldn't apologize. I think I enjoyed every aspect of your presentation and learned so many things about the structure, especially capital structure issues interpreted in terms of your interpretation with respect to China. So, thank you very much. I suppose there are quite a number of, comments, questions. So I'd like to ask if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion, please raise your hand and I'll be ready to pick. Okay, Kent.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Tianshu, for a very full presentation. As usual with your presentations, there's such a lot of rich material. It's one ends up with a lot of questions and a lot of comments, and I'll try to make mine short and simple. Let me start with some questions and then I'll make some comments. First of all, I was puzzled in your results that you have the negative effect of the loan deposit ratio on local banks having a negative effect on co-funding. See, to me, I interpret that as saying that if there's a loan deposit ratio condition, that's actually a constraint on lending by the local commercial banks, which actually means that there's less credit available for private firms or for firms in general, which actually would increase their desire for co-funding rather than decrease it. Now, if I've got that misinterpretation wrong, you can set me right. The other thing, the other question I have is about, you mentioned the high degree of uncertainty, and you measure this in terms of competition. Now, I noticed that your SOE dummy has a negative effect, which is what I would expect, because SOEs would have a stronger relationship with the banks because they are SOEs. But also, let me suggest to you that the CEO characteristics might be important here. And one of the things you might want to look at is the relationship of the CEO to the bank if they're members of the Communist Party, right? Because I don't know if you're familiar with this book here, you know, Company Man, Party Man, Company Man, all right? If you're a party man and you're a company man, you already have a network of relationships, which actually makes it stronger, that even if you are in a strongly competitive industry, but a weak company, you get the support of the Communist Party through your networks. So that's something that you might like to think about in terms of your interaction with your SOE dummy and your competition variable. I also have several comments, but I don't know if this is the right time to do it. But let me just make one. In your motivation analysis, you talked about what is the motivation for non-financial firms to engage in this financialization? Well, let me tell you that it's no different from why GE Capital at one stage was earning more from its finance than it was from its industry. It was able to secure funds from the capital market cheaper than their banks would be able to do it. And therefore, they were able to do financial services, and at one time was earning more from those financial services than from their industry. And that seems to me the same motivation for these non-financial firms in China. Also, you mentioned about informal finance, the advantage. What is the advantage for these non-financial firms in terms of informal finance, in terms of information? Well, again, let me point to a particular Chinese thing, and that is Guangxi and the networks that's created by the Communist Party system. So it seems to me that there is an informational advantage for co-funding. If you were to look at it in terms of the network of relationships that individuals have, and that might be something you can get from your survey as to the characteristics of the CEO of the companies. Anyway, I've got lots of other bits, but I don't want to monopolize this. So I'll leave that to somebody else to ask questions.
Thank you, Kent, for those useful observations, comments, and suggestions. Before I ask you to answer, Tianshu, could I ask you to please stop sharing your desktop so that it can, we can go back to the right screen.
Okay, so.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Do you want to, you don't have to respond to all of them. I suppose some of them were suggestions, as Kent mentioned, but just in case you want to respond to some of the questions.
May I answer Kent's comment right now?
Yeah, if you wish, if you wish. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let's come to the easiest one first. As far as political connection, Kent, I did introduce political connection because I'm actually follow Chinese literature when I generated my first equation. But actually, when I put SOE and the non-SOE, political connection is gone. Okay, I also put the CEO like a female, male, younger 40, or because I did those, but it's gone actually. So I kind of follow. Actually, when you first look at my okay, I do have a research question, but when I open my data, I don't know what the data is going to tell me. And therefore, I start from a generic specification, incorporate, what I know about Chinese literature regarding access to external finance, basically. I also, we understand, we introduce like a mean bank financial characteristic and so on. Actually, none of them is important in my equation. Okay, this is the first thing. So a second thing is about loan and the deposit ratio. So this data gathered from CSMAR. It really depends on whether loan has incorporated informal finance credit or whether the loan actually is recorded by the formal banking sector. But if you read the literature, normally, if they assume informal finance does not exist, they utilize as measurement of formal financial sector. Therefore, loan divided deposit, if it's very high, means in my explanation, I feel it's because, at the city level, actually, maybe it's formal finance actually quite, sufficient support, because, deposit is enough or whatsoever support, you don't need to go to co-funding anymore, yeah. This is my interpretation, basically. That measurement is at the city level. Also, the final measurement about perception of informal, informal environment is at firm level. Because when you look at the Chinese literature, majority of them just use like a provision characteristic. China is big. Our provision, my provision is almost one country, like Belgium. So this is the reason why I try to pull down, to try to utilize my data feature. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, Tianshu, for those helpful responses. Let's try to get the discussion going. We have a comments, raised hand from Peter.
Thank you, Professor. My micro is on, no? Yeah. Thanks, Professor. And I suppose Professor Zhao, no? Did I spell your surname correct? I'm sorry, I don't want to misspell, yeah? But thank you so much for a very exciting presentation. But given that we are trying to compare co-finance from the informal and formal sector, so my questions will tip towards, are the clients who are politically exposed people gets a better deal with regards to financing from formal sector or informal sector? So this is my first question. My second question is that your loan loss provision, does it follow the model system? And are you following the Basel concept with regards to following all the methodologies in the banking system? But nevertheless, I have to tell you the truth is that for us to get into the formal sector, we need to start in the informal sector first. And sometimes the formal sector does not exist vibrantly without the informal sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I can see that the insights of a former Minister of Finance is being reflected in the questions. Talk from both being an academic and a practitioner, especially the coexistence of those two sectors, informal and informal. I don't know whether you want to take that as a comment or you want to briefly answer. It's up to you, Tianshu, before we move on to the next one.
Thank you, Peter. I understand your first question is about a better deal. I think you're asking terms and condition of financial contract. We don't have detailed data, but when I do this research, I did have a private conversation to ask a professional banker who are working in the formal banking sector. I understand, they actually impose very rigorous control about how the external finance provided by them is used. For example, if it's used for purchase raw materials, nowadays banking sector in China actually do something quite similar as in-kind finance trade credit. They will just put the money to the suppliers rather than go through hand of the borrowing firm. Okay. Also, I know even they require banking sector, formal banking sector are required to ensure the repayment is sourced from operational activity. Therefore, for those firms, if they really like doing something nothing related to operational activity, they have to like try to get the money circulating around before they repay banks. Actually, if you read the law, commercial banking law, and the law regulation governing informal finance provider, you can see actually the requirement about how the financial contract is stipulated or how the people engage in providing these two types of finance dramatically different from each other. Put differently, we don't know because we have no detailed information about term and the conditions, but roughly if we categorize them into two groups, informal finance definitely have relaxed contract as far as restriction on operational freedom and flexibility is concerned. Okay, cost side is high, still high, but after the liberalization of interest rate completed, actually narrowed down. Also, Chinese government stipulate, even informal finance charge high has to control certain times compared to formal finance. Yeah, this is what I know. So again, as far as the Basel situation, yes, Chinese formal banking sector subject to Basel, situation. Yes, it's true. But actually, in my sample period, there's several policies implemented by Chinese government to promote formal banking sector to provide credit to the small media firm as well. Therefore, you shouldn't be surprised. Even small media firms seem to, because those banks has to fulfill their role. Therefore, kind of they open the door to small media firms to get a little bit sweetness from the policy. So. You said normally, yes, it's true. In normal situation, we will assume. Quite often we assume informal finance goes first and then formal finance, like packing order theory suggests. However, in this special sample period, what I believe is because, after the financial crisis, then formal finance reverse, then informal finance, like peer-to-peer lending, different types of, provider informal finance, they actually started to, add on in the original, financial system. So this is also the reason why I have incentives to introduce a variable in my model. I want to know the births when they register, what kind of external finance they are using. Okay, somehow control some like culture or like entrepreneurial attitude or religious belief or like a deep reason, like they just don't want to use or want to use a certain type of finance. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and especially covering those details. While I wait for the next hand to go up and to share a question, let me say how interesting I found this presentation, and also the scope of the paper relying on such a wide coverage of a survey for all the main regions in China. I think that's absolutely comprehensive. The literature was also very, very interesting in terms of how you are able to, build on, the current work in this area and introduce this concept of, confounding and financialization. But I just want to raise a couple of maybe observations and coming from especially like the corporate finance angle, especially on the theory of kind of corporate finance. The first one is about the co-funding concept, the way you apply it. You have formal, informal, and then co-funding. It may well be the nature of your data, but traditional corporate finance, especially on debt, tries to distinguish between short-term debt and long-term debt. I'm not sure whether this was not possible in your data, or at all it didn't matter, or we should assume that all debt is short-term. So this is my first question, because basically it would make a lot of difference when you are, say, computing the cost of capital, but you didn't have to do that in this research, but just in case, in terms of the data, the time, structure of the informal as well as formal, and whether there is a time dimension. My second observation is that you are trying to look at to try to explain the driving force as in your second kind of objective. So if I interpret this driving force in terms of, say, corporate finance models, I would have expected two variables, and there is a reason why they couldn't feature here. One is a risk, which sometimes is measured as uncertainty, but sometimes as just simple risk. Okay. As these may be belonging to, say, formal and informal finance may have two asset classes, and therefore they have different risk return characteristics that may be possible. And also maybe, and say, in some surveys, they take the manager's perception of risk or the manager's perception of uncertainty. But maybe the question, okay. The other component, the other bit that also comes from corporate finance is the question of tax considerations. Because formal borrowing and informal borrowing are types of debt, okay, and in corporate finance, debt has tax advantages. But what I wanted to find out, given my limited knowledge of China, is I'm sure that the formal debt, the formal borrowing, gets a debt advantage, debt consideration, so it can be kind of deducted, and therefore it has a the usual tax shield and has tax advantages. But I'm not sure whether the informal has. Maybe the informal doesn't. Okay, and that's the difference. If formal debt, formal borrowing and informal borrowing, both of them have tax advantages, then maybe it doesn't matter. Now, if, however, it mattered and the two have different implications for tax, then you would have a very important policy implication in terms of being able to distinguish. You would be saying, okay, let's look at this and see. Maybe there are tax policy implications for firms. Again, this is a question from my limited knowledge of Chinese firms. And finally, is whether the entire analysis for the paper, it appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is based only on the survey data you have. Okay. Now, as you can see from all the ESRC projects now, they pay a lot of attention to mixed methods in the analysis. And if these companies have some available secondary data, the traditional one, total assets, kind of loans, so which are the traditional you find from a balance sheet data of companies, which pins down the company characteristics, then it would be possible to actually have a kind of mixed methods kind of analysis where you are interrogating both the data from the questionnaire as well as the data, secondary data you can get. And then for ticking the boxes of your research project on ESRC, you say mixed methods were invoked. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that's all I can say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, just your possible suggestions and yeah. Let me see. In terms of we have a question by Jeffrey. Jeffrey Gedosa is a brilliant young researcher, working 24/7 on some of these. Is actually very relevant work. So, Jeffrey.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for this presentation. My comment is actually a bit of a recommendation. I wanted to suggest you look at one paper that was published in the Journal of Financial Intermediation by Allen in 2019, because they started their work because of the missed evidence in the literature, where some studies have found that the formal and informal financing are complementary, while others found are substitute. So what they have done to break this down is to divide the informal financing in China into two groups, where they have the constructive informal financing, such as trade loan, and then they have the underground informal financing. Those so those ones use force and all that to enforce that whatever. So what they found in their study is that the constructive informal financing, they have information advantage. It only them that they have the complementary results, because they help these little firms without access to finance to progress from trade financing and link them up to the formal financial institution. So in a way, through the constructive informal, those little firms are able to move from no access to finance to access to finance. Then the underground financing, they use force, and that kind of explains the result. Because when you look at the literature, like you said, in terms of policy implication, you want a holistic approach or a reform. So this will really help to explain the difference. And if you may look at that, I think that will provide some understanding and see how that adds value to your studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, I was expecting you to mention something about information advantage. Yeah, very good. Yes, because that's what Jeffrey is looking at in the information asymmetry, information sharing. So very good comment and suggestion of the paper by Aaron and others. Yeah, thank you indeed. Okay, do we have any questions, comments, observations? I see only 2 hands up, but I'm not sure that these are old hands. I see the hand by Peter. Is this an old hand or anyone else? Okay, an old hand. I see in the chat room, and let me ask Meng to help me whether she can see anything in the chat room. No?
No.
No, we don't see anything in the chat room. Then I see Kent here, Zand going. Yeah, there is Kent and Peter. Okay, Kent, please go ahead. Yeah. Welcome back.
It's really is a comment on the last question about the paper by Alan, because there's a paper by Alan that actually questions the point you made at the end about regulation. I mean, my question to you is, why even raise the question about regulation? Why regulate? This seems to be a market solution where the non-financial firms have a layer of capital themselves on top of the bank's capital, which means that you actually got an extra cushion of safety. And therefore, this is not creating instability or fragility. Why even think about regulating?
Actually, the literature suggests informal finance provider, actually Chinese literature, informal finance provider, they are very interested in the customer who has a borrowing relationship with bank as well, because they feel it's safer, particularly for those who immediately could refinance themselves from formal banking sector, because in China, you have to repay and then I can lend out, cannot lower the loans. Therefore, actually, a lot of loan officer, like I talk to professional banker, they actually also have a friend who are working in the small loan company, just to introduce them, those customer as a client. Then they know the informal finance provider knows they immediately can get finance from banking sector. Then they kind of provide, credit as a bridge loan, basically. Yeah. So yeah, that's true, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So what are well, yeah. How to say? So actually, I know the literature about the information advantage. I do know it. However, I really, as a Chinese, when I start to read the literature, of course you can assume it exists. I start to feel very confused because, like borrowing from family and friends, it's never been my first choice. Like. Okay. I also read all the like small loan company and so on. I don't. I think I'm an economist. Therefore, I would interpret things from like utility maximization or profit maximization perspective. Also, I read the literature about the trade credit. They directly actually question why, if you really trust your customer, why don't you just supply cash? Why you sell what you sold? You finance, you provide finance in the way associated with the product. So basically, they can reduce the diversion of use of long funds to alternative use. So this is the literature basically question this.
We are running out of time, but maybe we can bring in Peter once again.
Oh.
I can see your hand up. Briefly, a brief comment, and then we close.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Professor Zhao, informal finance consists of families, friends, relatives, whereas the formal, it's a question of shareholders, participation, and then the loan loss provision. I suppose, the formal finance must be very, very strict, whereas informal, I don't think they make a loan loss provision. It's a question of persuasion for them to collect the money from their clients. Thank you so much. Good presentation. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you indeed. I think that's a very good point to end this seminar. It's been absolutely exciting, interesting, presented with so much energy, all this from start to finish. And for me, I enjoyed every aspect of it. I think you have an absolutely interesting paper, and I hope that you find the comments are very helpful.
Thank you very much.
On the way, and that we see the next version of the paper is circulated. Thanks very much, Tianshu, for making the time to be with us and share your research with us. Thank you to everyone who is present here for being able to make this seminar and to contribute to this discussion. And now we are taking a break. This is the Easter break, since this week is the last week of term at SOAS. And we'll be coming back after Easter on the 28th of April. That is our next seminar. So let me wish you a good rest and a good break. And, once again, thanks very much indeed. Okay, have a nice Easter break. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We should approach to you, Tianshu, for
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.